Ruslan.
Dennis Prager went on one of my favorite Catholic apologists channel, Matt Fradd, and addressed his recent comments in a Jordan Peterson Exodus roundtable discussion about corn and how in the Orthodox Jewish position that he holds to, or in the Jewish worldview, that it is not deemed, I guess, as much of a wrongdoing and sinful as in the Christian tradition, where we look at the words of Jesus and Jesus saying that anyone who lusts after a woman, they have committed adultery in their heart. And so they had a fiery exchange on the Jordan Peterson clip, and then Matt sat down with Dennis Prager to unpack some of this further. Now, this was a fascinating conversation. I'm going to be playing you guys 4 different clips, and I really do encourage you guys to go and watch the full video. I think they have an extended version of it on Matt's Locals, and it is fascinating, okay? And there's a part that goes really dark that we're not gonna be able to get to in this video, so go show them some love. But before we get into that, guys, do me a favor, smash that like button for the algorithm. Really helps us out a ton. And by the way, if this is something you're dealing with in your personal life, be sure to stay till the very end, because we'll provide you guys some resources on how to find freedom in this area.
I don't care if you dislike Jews. I care how you treat Jews. And that is it goes to the
Dennis Prager's Jewish, of course.
Essence of what my belief is. I want to know how you act. This bothers me that your thoughts can be regarded as a demerit.
But your thought.
So he's saying that within his paradigm, one's thoughts and one's attraction, desires shouldn't matter as much as someone's actions. Okay, and again, this is where in the Christian faith it would differ, because how you think about things and why you do things you do matter. Check out this clip where I was extremely interested in terms of his view on this, and I think this is a part in the conversation where I think Dennis Prager actually catches a W, okay? And then he catches some L's later on, but listen to what he says here.
I think that in the bedroom, if a loving husband, and who is a loving husband, and I have a word to say about what a loving husband is, a loving husband who sees his wife in the bedroom as a sexual object, I will be totally open with you. I have said on the radio, if after X number of years married, your husband still sees you as a sex object, you are both very lucky.
I would say it depends what you mean by sex object. If what
Okay, that's a great take, okay? Because what they're getting into is the nitty-gritty of, can you lust after your own spouse, and is there a time and a place where you're objectifying her and seeing her just as an object? And Dennis Prager says, if you've been married for decades and you still are drawn to your wife in this way, that's a massive W. Now, Matt is going to push back here in a few different things, and they go back and forth on this, which I think is very, very interesting. Okay, so listen to what Matt says here.
Mean is your husband continues to find you sexually desirable, I would agree with you. If what you mean is the man essentially treats his wife as a warm body to masturbate in, not taking into account her feelings, her desires.
Oh, of course,
right.
but that's not objectification. Has a dirty name. He said he doesn't. The father said one shouldn't even objectify baseball players. And
so now to get into the particulars of what does it mean to objectify, right? And then what I like about Dennis Prager here, he nails down a very specific point, and then he clarifies his entire position on corn and kind of, again, an additional L he takes. So listen.
You make love outside the bedroom, and you have sex inside the bedroom.
Interesting application he's giving.
I think it's a romanticization of the sex act to say that it's always making love. It's okay to make lust. It's okay to have some objectification. That doesn't mean you're mistreating her.
And this is getting to the core of the issue, is within a Christian marriage or within a godly marriage, can someone lust after their own spouse? Right? It's an interesting tension that's being created here. But in this exact same conversation, Dennis kind of pins down Matt, who's coming from a very Catholic point of view, which I'll kind of unpack that here in a second.
Yeah, I think I'd want to know what you mean by objectification.
Because
I had the sense that you're using language to convey something that I might agree with.
Yes, you might. I think you really might. I agree with you. It certainly doesn't mean mistreat. It's not even implied. But any more than with the baseball player. Now, and you'll say, well, I have a different relationship with the baseball player, but you're right. Sex is its own world. I don't like to romanticize sex. Sex is many things. Sometimes it's love. Sometimes it's just pure sex. When it's pure sex and not just love, there is an element of objectification. I'm crazy about her legs.
By the way, men and women are going to look at this very differently. Okay? That statement alone, men and women are going to look at very differently.
Is that a statement of love? What do you mean? You don't love legs?
What do you mean by love, right? So I would say Aristotle and Aquinas would say that to love is to will the good of the other for their sake. So
Correct.
I don't will
That's
my
fine.
wife's good for my sake. It's not like I say, honey, I really need you to go to CrossFit so I can lust after you.
Well, what?
But if I,
That's an interesting thing. He says wouldn't tell his wife to go to CrossFit so he can lust after her. Would it be healthy for a couple to have the value of health and fitness and to encourage each other to be in optimal shape so that attraction continues to flourish and thrive? Is that a bit of a different take there, right? Now listen to what Dennis Prager says next.
to get healthy for her sake, then this is love.
But
So
if she says to you, honey, there's a certain thing that you could do for me sexually that will really turn me on, and it may not really turn you on, are you being objectivized?
What a great question. What a great question. And here is where I think Matt stumbles and kind of takes an L. Listen to what he says.
You doing it because you love her and because she wants
Well,
it.
first of all, she's asked a question in which I presumably am free to decline.
If she's
so
not free to decline, that's coercion,
Right.
and there's no room for that.
So there is
objectification
so
and
if she's
coercion
asking
are
me a
not the same
question
thing.
which I'm free to decline.
Right.
She's not,
So, honey, would you put on this sexy outfit for me? Are you okay with that?
me?
Yeah.
Bloody hell, that's a question I didn't expect you to ask.
Well,
me.
you opened it up.
I would not be okay with that.
And mind you guys, I love Trent Horn. I love Matt. Pints with Aquinas. I'm a huge fan of Aquinas. I think this is where he takes an L, and I think this is coming from his Catholic paradigm. And the Catholic paradigm, not always, but generally speaking, has a view where you can't separate the act of intimacy from enjoying pleasure in your spouse and not having the potential to procreate, right? Meaning that you have to always be willing and ready for procreation to happen, and those two are connected. This is why Catholics generally tend to be against all form of birth control. Whereas I would say in the Protestant view, intimacy can be just pleasure, because the way we look at Song of Solomon, most of us, we don't look at it as an allegorical book between Jesus and the church. We look at it as a very adult, sensual book about two people who are in love together, enjoying each other. He's coming at this from a very different point of view. And I think Dennis Prager, believe it or not, even though he's Jewish, I actually agree with him. I totally disagree with his stance on corn, and we're going to get there in a second. But I actually think Dennis Prager makes a very good point here.
It's interesting.
I don't think.
Even in the bedroom.
It's not that I'd be morally opposed to it. It's just that I'd feel uncomfortable with it.
Well, my view is that the more comfort that the couple has, the better the relationship.
I think
So he said he wouldn't be morally opposed to it, he would just feel uncomfortable with it. Why would he feel uncomfortable? Because I think this is some of his Catholic paradigm coming in here.
it's right, so long as comfort doesn't lead to what I would consider to be sexually perverse acts.
Well, why
like
is it sexually
sodomy.
perverse to wear a sexy outfit?
It's not, and that's why I said I'm not morally opposed to it. But if you're
okay,
saying
so your
that
discomfort is personal. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's not an area I need to get into.
one thing I would
So very, very, very good clarification. So now I want to go to this last clip where they get into specifically what he means by corn and why he didn't have an issue with lust, which, by the way, I disagree with. But listen to how he defines it. I think Dennis does a good job clarifying what he meant here.
So she was on a date,
He's talking about one of his female colleagues.
and they were both attracted. It was not the first date, and they kissed. That's all they did. They kissed. And in the midst of the kiss, he grabbed her neck.
Fellas, don't do this. Don't be grabbing necks of women when you're trying to kiss them. That's weird. And don't do that.
Like this. And even me, Mr. Open, was taken aback. And so was she. To her credit, when she took his hand away, she said either then or later that evening or later another time, "Why did you do that?" And he, to his credit, was open enough to say, "I thought you would like it. That's what I see on the internet."
This is the self-destructive nature of engaging with porn is how it warps and twists what intimacy is intended to be, because that's where you're getting accused from.
That's a bad thing.
Yes.
That's the number of young men who learn about women through porn and not real life is a very scary thing that has developed. So I am as worried as you are about the pornification of society. When I answered the question that Jordan Peterson asked, which came out of nowhere, I'm not blaming him in the least, it was a perfectly legit question, but it came out of nowhere. I was thinking still in the way I have always defined it as Playboy magazine.
Here, he now goes to define what he meant specifically by porn.
I was raised in a very sexually open home that was also deeply religious, and I never found them conflicting, as he didn't. And so he was an outlier, I acknowledge, and I am an outlier, I acknowledge. However, I want people to understand, my parents were together 72 years, and they loved each other crazy. When she died at 89, he died at 96. He basically, his life ended. His screensaver was, I love you, Hindi. That was his nickname for her. Her name was Hilda. And she knew he got Playboy. This did not trouble my mother. Oh, that's Mac. Okay, I'm married to a live wire who was faithful and who loved me, and she was crazy about him, and that was it.
What would be better? For your father to love your mother and get Playboy, or for your father to say, even though I'm tempted to look at pornography, my wife's body is enough for me, and I'm not going to look at that even though I'm tempted to?
That's a very fair question. I don't have an answer, which will... I should give you the answer you want.
I think you should too.
And this is where I think Dennis Prager messed up. He knows what the answer is. And he goes to acknowledge it.
Yes, that's a good point. You do. I don't know what that means enough. To my luck, I am married to a woman who does not find male sexual nature frightening. Most women do, and by the way, I understand that.
But again, I think we have to make the distinction between sexual arousal and sitting and fantasizing or watching
Actually, they looked at it together.
And if you... Well, that's...
They looked at it together.
Too, I think.
Why is it sad?
Because I think pornography is a perversion of the sexual act.
Yeah, well, okay.
Which is holy.
What if they looked... Okay,
let me finish. Yep. Which is God's first commandment to humanity. Be fruitful and multiply. It is the most intimate thing two human beings can do together. Not watch The Office, not go for a walk on the beach. It's the fundamental act that brings about the family, which brings about society. I'm of the opinion that if you pervert that fundamental act...
I don't know why it's perverted. Why is it perverted? Why is it perversion?
Because it usurps the natural end of sexual intercourse. If I eat food and then force myself to throw up, I'm usurping...
Okay, but I don't think that it's a fair analogy. Let's say they looked at bathing suit ads, not at Playboy. Just they looked at that other beautiful women together. And it was okay with my mother.
That's still weird though. Just looking at bathing suit ads for the sake of looking at other beautiful women together. Isn't that weird? Like, come on, Dennis. That's just weird, bro. And yes, it is soft corn. That's weird. What are you doing?
But if pornography means anything that is arousing, then it could be a bra ad.
Right. I think I could define pornography like this. I could say material which depicts erotic behavior.
Not behavior. There's no behavior in Playboy.
Okay. Well,
no, it's not behavior. That's an important distinction.
No, I think when you say behavior, I think you're meaning video or acting
No, I didn't.
Out.
That's why
What do you
I
mean
regret.
by behavior then?
No, I don't. I am not advocative of watching sexual behavior.
But I want to know what you mean by the word behavior, because if I'm going to say it's
sexual activity between two people.
Okay, so even a photograph in Playboy of two people engaging in a.
But there weren't such. When
my father
got,
you're opposed to that, but you're okay with a man looking at one naked woman, let's say.
Yes, or they weren't even naked then. They were covered in their privates.
Right.
Again, it's smart that he did provide context for this. He's saying that the stuff that his dad had in the 60s was people covered. That doesn't change the fact that that's still mad weird to look at. And there's a spectrum between a man being attracted to an attractive woman and a man capturing an image or taking that second glance, marinating on it, thinking about the things he can do with her. There's a wide spectrum there. And I think Dennis Prager dug his heels into this conversation and unnecessarily could have just conceded the point that Matt was brilliantly making.
But you're opposed to them looking at anything that might be arousing. What if a woman is wearing a regular, what if a man is turned on, which every man is, by an attractive woman in a nice dress?
I'm okay
looking at with the wife.
I'm okay looking at breasts, and I'm okay looking at bums. And if you go to the Sistine Chapel, you'll see that Catholics are perfectly comfortable with nudity. But I think that nudity can be presented in a way that upholds and expresses the dignity of the person. So
now this is the Sistine Chapel time, which, by the way, I've been to Rome. I've seen the Sistine Chapel. It's beautiful, and there's nude stuff in there, right? So I think he's actually making a great point.
I could say, okay, I could look at that and marvel at God's creation and the beauty of woman and the beauty of man. But I think I could also look at a lingerie catalog and, in my mind, treat this person as a mere object. So I would say that in one aspect, I'm okay looking at breasts, let's say, Sistine Chapel. But in another sense, if I'm looking at a lingerie catalog with the intention of lusting, that wouldn't be okay.
What if I'm looking at the lingerie catalog with the intention of getting my wife lingerie?
I think the intention does matter, yeah.
They went back and forth on this. The conversation is extremely fascinating. There's one point where it takes a really dark turn, and they start talking about maps and, you know what I'm talking about? The minor, minor attracted. Yeah, so they start talking about that. It got really interesting. Now, I think Matt did a fantastic job in terms of really engaging with Dennis, really explaining why that the objectification of people's bodies with the intent of arousal is just not good. It's not good for the brain. And he wrote a whole book about this that you guys could check out. It's called The Corn Myth. I recommend you check it out, and it seems really interesting. And he says he doesn't use any Bible verses or any theology. He just strictly goes off of the data. And I feel like the data is pretty unanimous that looking at this stuff is terrible for your brain. It'll rot your brain. It'll distort your view of intimacy. Now, the only part where I think I disagree with him is that I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying each other for the sake of strictly pleasure. I don't think there's anything wrong for lingerie or doing certain things like that, because I think in the Christian paradigm, God allows us to enjoy pleasure. God created certain things for pleasure, that not everything has to be strictly for procreation. And I feel like Matt kind of comes a bit from that angle, as most Catholics do. And I think that's the area where we disagree, is like, hey, if you have an understanding in the bedroom and you guys want to role play, you want to try on different things, you want to talk about getting fit, listen, all that stuff is fine. As far as I'm concerned, and I would say Song of Solomon echoes that. I think Dennis Prager takes an L in consistently trying to rationalize something that maybe in his context was different than it was today, but just because it was different, just because corn was different in the 60s, does not mean that it was beneficial, fruitful, and healthy. Right? And so he's talking about the intent, and he's talking about the exception to the rule. He's talking about all these different things. And I didn't really see a lot of the arguments fleshed out, but I'm glad that he did provide clarity. Now, if you are someone that's watching this video and you're struggling with this issue, MasterMyHabits.com is a free course that basically walks you through how to find freedom in this area, okay? So, MasterMyHabits.com, you can take that completely for free. It's all about freedom forming habits. We're really trying to provide resource. If you're struggling with this, if you guys don't know my story, I had wrestled with this for decades, and by the grace of God, found freedom. Check out the other video where I initially reacted to this entire conversation. We'll have that pinned up over here. If you want to go the extra mile, partner with us for as little as $5 a month, consider joining our online community here. The link will be here. You could check out our daily after party streams, podcast, all that good stuff. I'll see you over there. Peace.